You're listening to the Mind Your Own Business podcast, aimed at helping photographers learn how to make the leap from amateur to pro. Hello and welcome to the Mind Your Own Business podcast, a joint effort brought to you by Photofocus and Skip Cohen University. This is Shamira Young, and I'm joined by my co-host, Skip Cohen. Skip, how are you?
Hey, here we are.
Here we are.
I am really pumped up today. It may not sound like it because I've been up all night with two sick puppies, but we've got a very good buddy joining us today. Shiv Verma is going to join us, and it is a kick to have him on Mind Your Own Business. He's an artist. He's an author, educator, technologist, and most important of all, he's a really good friend to so many of us in the industry. Now, over the last few years, what I've enjoyed is that he and I have had a lot of time together at a couple different conventions and developed kind of an ever-growing friendship because of his role as both a Lumix Global Ambassador and an ambassador and technical advisor for Platypod. So the other side of Shiv, if you don't know enough about him, and you'll know a lot more in a few minutes, his passion for the craft is second to none. And we've had a lot of his images that we've shared on both the SCU and Platypod blogs. But best of all is Shiv's ability to never lose sight of the power of a great photograph, especially now when we're all dealing with the pandemic. So in terms of the topics today, we're going to talk about things he's been doing to boost creativity, his outlook on the industry, and maybe here and there'll probably be a few great ideas to help artists stay focused during the pandemic. So after all of that, Shiv, if you're still with us, it is time for your lips to move.
Well, I tell you something, Skip, I'm humbled. That intro is just way up in the sky. And, thank you so much. It's absolutely wonderful to be here with the two of you. But more importantly, as Skip said, in times like the way we are and these kind of days, I think anything that any of us can do with not just this industry, but with creativity in general can be, rewarding and very satisfying. So, I'm thrilled to be on with you. And a question that I have for you before you ask me questions is, should I be minding my own business?
Absolutely.
Actually, here's the backstory on that. Rich Harrington and I were starting this podcast. I think it was Rich's idea, and he called me, and it's like, come on, let's do a podcast. And this is going back, I don't know, 5 years ago, maybe longer. And we couldn't come up with a name, and I yelled to Sheila, give me a name for a podcast we're going to do where we're going to talk about what you need to do to take control of your business and marketing and skill set. And she just yelled back, mind your own business. And I thought she was yelling at me to tell me mind my own business. And it just became it's the perfect name here. And this is the time, and just to add to your comment there, I mean, this is a time when everybody's got an opportunity to mind their own business in a way that they've never had to do before. And there's some unique opportunities out there too.
Well, thank you for that. I mean, that really brings it all together, and even more so because I think what we have going for us really is an opportunity to mind our own business, really mind it. Yeah.
Absolutely. And Shiv, let's kick this off with our favorite first question. Tell us about yourself. For those listeners who may not know who you are, how did you get started as a photographer, and how did you end up doing what you're doing today?
Let's start with why. And I know Skip has this as a product that he produces called Why. And I think the real thing that I got intrigued with as a very young person was the ability to, capture things in time. And it was, I think, before I actually went into high school that I started playing around with cameras. And I still use this statement in my photography, is that if I can capture something in time and then hopefully eternalize it, it makes a lot of sense to continue to do it. And that's really where this whole, art concept and passion evolved. And I didn't have much money. My father was in the army, in the Indian Army, and you don't get paid a lot. But he was kind enough to, give me pocket money, which I used to not buy, but borrow cameras. Give people a little money to borrow their camera. Till I turned about, I think either it was 11 or 13 when my grandfather gave me his Leica outfit. It was literally an outfit, cameras, lenses, filters, the whole gamut. And that was it. I mean, I was hooked, cooked, and booked. And I've been like that for years and years and years. It was nice that, in our school that I was going to, it was a boarding school, which gave us an opportunity for extracurricular activities. And a lot of that, allowed one not only to do photography, but then to go into the school's dark rooms and do processing. And for those of you who've seen me know that I have a very long nose, and my nose is my downfall, because it really allows me to smell things beyond what normal people smell. And, photographic chemicals don't smell good. So that kind of put an end to my doing my own development and things. And I would send everything out. And quite honestly, when digital came into being, it was the best thing that could ever have happened. And I just dove into it, hook, line, sinker, you name it. I was completely convinced that photography could continue in my life. And I think today I look back at 2003 and say, you know what, the best thing that ever happened is I put film away and digital came into being. And that's what I've really thoroughly enjoyed. But just to fill in the blanks, after high school, I was, in university. Then I joined IBM, spent a number of years with IBM. And IBM actually shut down operations in India in 1978. And that's when, when they closed down, I was offered a job with the then Prime Computer, later to become Computer Vision, and moved to the Boston area and became very familiar with a company called Polaroid. And I don't know whether we really spent any time together, but I kind of knew of Skip back then. And I think our friendship has evolved, but more so since the Panasonic days. But, Skip's been like a photography mentor to a whole lot of people, not just myself. But he takes photography and transitions it into the business aspects, which to me is one of the most difficult things. So, thanks, Skip.
Well, you're welcome. But the challenge is that you as an artist, and you're really interesting because you seem to have, or you've faked it out enough, a great balance between left brain and right brain. And I got into loving the marketing and business side because I'm actually off the chart on the right brain. In other words, I can come up with great ideas, but I hate to implement them. And you've got photographers who are out there being creative and not paying attention to anything else and not minding your own business. So it's just kind of fit. So, now that you thanked me earlier, thank you. I'll thank you now. But now I'm going to hit you with a hard question. First one. Ready?
Go for it. Yes.
Let's just go back. Before I ask you what you're doing these days with the pandemic, what do you remember as your first paid job or photograph, something in imaging? What were you doing at the time?
You're not going to believe this. my first paid job, I actually did 2 of them, and I swore never to do it again. I actually shot a wedding.
Oh, God.
Wow.
And,
Okay.
and
Was
I,
it an Indian wedding, which typically goes for days?
no. Thank
Okay.
God it wasn't. But I'm going to say something, and to you wedding photographers, God bless you, because you have something that I don't. And yeah, I got married pretty young. And fortunately, I had a very good mother-in-law. And I never experienced the term mother-in-law as it is defined. But my first wedding that I photographed, I learned what dealing with 2 mothers-in-law was like. And I really contemplated giving up photography because it was torture. And then I was roped into a second one. And to be honest with you, Skip, I felt like giving the money back that I earned just to prevent any further torture.
It takes a unique temperament, and I love working with wedding photographers because, as Bambi Cantrell has put it, a wedding is a time when logic does not reign as king. And if you look at the control that a tabletop photographer might have, or a portrait photographer in the studio, you've got to be ready for everything. And I have so much respect and a true love for the wedding industry because of the way they deal with the challenges. And that's not to say that it doesn't take just as much of a skill set for a commercial tabletop or a lifestyle shooter or somebody that's doing fashion or portraiture. But it is unique, and it does take a very, very unique set of personality traits that just to be able to be patient. And I assisted on 2 weddings with Dennis Reggie years ago, and watching Dennis in action when something didn't go the way it was supposed to go was an amazing thing to watch. And I guess I got us off track a little bit just now. Let's talk about the pandemic.
Yeah.
What things are you doing, and what things do you find that photographers in the area are doing to stay focused on their passion and their love for the craft at a time when everybody thinks that hunkering down means you're just going to walk away from your business for a while? Or too many people think that way.
True. Skip, interesting you asked that question, because the first question, which was, what was your first paid job, which wasn't the most satisfying, but my second paid job was very satisfying. And the reason I bring that up is it kind of leads into what I'm doing today. I got involved with people who were very, very intense into cancer research and doing research for, plasma and the whole world of chromatography and, extraction tubes and things like that. And they came to me and they said, we'd like you to image these products and the process of extraction and the process of chromatography. And we'll bring everything over to you and, set it up and photograph it and give us back the images. There's 2 criteria. One, it has to be perfect. That means there should be no distortions. And 2, there can be no color change or color aberrations. And if you can do it, you get paid. If you don't do it, you don't get paid. So it led to my sitting indoors and planning and photographing and redoing it and redoing it and redoing it, because it's not easy. When you're trying to photograph a tube that's 5 foot long, and they want every gradation from the very beginning to the end to be totally visible, it can't be done in a single photograph. It can't be done in 2 photographs. So I actually started building rigs to do this kind of photography. And those rigs eventually ended up in what I developed a passion for, which is both macro and time-lapse. And I actually use time-lapse rails to photograph chromatography tubes, where you take sequences of images moving the camera along a rail at the same axis of the chromatography tube. Now, all that requires you to do is to light it perfectly, to have your color set perfectly, to be patient, and to learn to take hundreds of images and then reject a few hundred while you're doing that. So it evolved into what I call learning to be patient and learning to be meticulous. So that evolution has helped me tremendously during this pandemic because I don't have to go anywhere. I can sit in my studio and photograph for hours on end, experimenting with things like color, with light, with objects. And I love to pick up the most complex of subject matter to photograph it because it's thrilling to get an end result that looks perfectly photographed. So, enough said.
Oh, this is so cool. You know, the word mad scientist comes to mind, and that's a compliment, Shiv. Hearing you talk about
actually,
your process.
You know what? Skip has an individual who he has done some stuff with, and actually, I have a very high regard for him because he's truly a mad scientist, and that's Don Komarechka.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Don is amazing. He's amazing.
Playing off of time-lapse, is it possible because I see time-lapse as one of the next fun things that photographers could offer clients. And maybe it's a time lapse of, I don't know, decorating the Christmas tree. Maybe it's mom and grandma and the kids and everybody cooking Thanksgiving dinner. Is there can you do like a 1 to 2 minute tutorial suggesting here are the basics just for people to go experiment with and to do their own time lapse?
Actually, yes, absolutely. There's a 1 or 2 minute tutorial. It's even better if you have a camera that does time lapse within the confines of the camera itself, and that's one of the things that Panasonic allows you to do is to not only shoot a time lapse sequence, but actually have the camera assemble the video for you, and now you have a time lapse video. The 1 minute action step format is set your camera up so that it's not going to move and think about what it is that you want to photograph the time lapse of. If it's not moving, don't bother. If it's moving, all you're really trying to do is to show that movement in a quicker time frame or in a shorter time frame. So you're really compressing time. And I think, Skip, you bring up this point, which is very, very interesting. If you think about children that are in schools that are not doing in-school learning, that all the learning or a lot of the learning is now remote and from home, how can you take the concept of photography and time lapse and bring it into the classroom / remote classroom environment? And the thing that I've been doing somewhat. My wife is a teacher in pre-K, and conceptually, just think about a very, very interesting topic. How does a plant grow? Now, you can take a seed and put it in some cotton wool and wet it and put it into a glass tube and, spend days watching the roots come out and this thing grow. But if you were to set a camera up and do a time-lapse sequence of the same thing, And now you can show the entire process from the time the seed was planted till the leaves come out and the plant is ready to go into fruit in a matter of 10 to 15 seconds. That demonstrates the power of this technology in education.
That's so interesting. And I love that these are ideas that photographers can do, whether they currently have clients or not because of the pandemic. I mean, this is very cool.
And also, think about use time-lapse. I mean, you can use time-lapse to demonstrate, your travels. Yes, that's one way to do it. Mm-hmm. You can use it for education, and you can use it also for, personal records. If you're remodeling your home or if you're remodeling your kitchen, stick a camera up in the corner and just let it sequentially take images of the entire process and then put a video together. So if your kitchen takes, 5 days to remodel, nobody's going to sit and watch a 5-day long movie. But if you can compress all of that into 5 minutes, it becomes a very interesting thing to watch. And that's the whole concept of compressing time so that it remains viable and keeps a person's interest alive.
See, I'm thinking of it as even as a consumer product with a portrait photographer that's doing a family sitting and taking that half hour before the sitting of the family getting ready, mm-hmm. And then into position.
Or the behind the scenes, yeah.
Yeah, as time, and suddenly it becomes a fun holiday card, depending on how you close it. And everybody right now is looking at those. Everybody's got projects and things that they're doing around their house because we've got, for the first time ever, we have something that we never have enough of, and that's time.
Yeah. And Skip, the whole, I want to bring platypod into this. The whole thing about a platypod sitting inside an oven, taking pictures of something baking. Well, kind of risky to put your camera into a hot oven, but what if you had an oven where you could actually place a camera on the outside and watch a cake bake? You can have a cake bake in 20 seconds instead of the full hour that it takes from beginning to end. So I mean, yeah, there's tons of projects. There's tons of projects that can be done, and if you're looking at it from a commercial viability point of view, it's another way of bringing interest to advertising.
So Shiv, one thing that we're super curious about is how are you keeping your optimism and your morale up? Because with the pandemic, plus the crazy news stories out there, I mean, there's a lot going on. And for some photographers, it's all doom and gloom, especially because their business has been affected. So how are you keeping your spirits up right now?
Well, I don't think anybody should make this into a gloom and doom type scenario, because this is an opportunity that you otherwise wouldn't have. Number one, you've got time, and when we're busy doing our photography or earning a living, running around, whether you are into corporate photography or you're into wedding photography or whatever it is that you make your living from, you never have the opportunity to really spend quality time to further your business, to be able to modify your portfolio, to be able to even things like your website. If you're not concentrating on the promotion for yourself, then you're actually missing out a tremendous opportunity. The other thing is, we all have portfolios of images. And isn't this a great time to think about maybe culling out things that are archaic, which are no longer valid, no longer replicable, and then actually building up a new portfolio by doing things that you can do even without the travel, without having to go far. Nobody's restricting you from, adding to your creativity. Just as an example, a wedding photographer, not that I'm a wedding photographer, but a wedding photographer can learn, practice, and apply their photographic knowledge to new and creative ways of doing things that they could then bring forward to the next wedding. How about doing some still life photography and creating things with wedding flowers or with, champagne glasses, really honing your skills to make those images look different, or perfecting your skills that you otherwise were missing because you were never a macro photographer, as an example, or you never did product photography. So here's an opportunity to really hone your skills, to take your craft to a brand new level and demonstrate it using your portfolio to show what else you can do now. And you know what? This time is not permanent. I mean, we're going to get over this pandemic. We're going to get over all of this at some point. And when you want to come out fresh with something that is also fresh.
One of our guests early on the F-64 lunch bunch that we started to do at the beginning of the pandemic was Joe McNally. Mm-hmm. And I remember Joe saying that he was looking at this downtime as his opportunity to finally learn Final Cut Pro. And, we all have our icons, and you tend to think, wow, McNally knows everything. And here's somebody that is one of the finest photographers, people in our industry, and he's recognizing, hey, this is a good time for me to expand my skill set.
And then, Skip, to that very point that you're making, is if you have a skill set, and if you really want to, it doesn't preclude you from teaching that skill set to others who want to learn. And yeah, it may not be a one-on-one educational program, but it could be, Zoom calls. It could be Skype calls. It could be, a way to bring in some incremental revenue, because you could teach these courses. You could, teach talent and make a little money out of it. So if you have a skill set that is in demand, and you don't mind educating others, not that everybody can be an educationalist, but at least you can have some teaching capability and earn something to keep yourself going. But don't drop it, because if you drop it, what are you going to do? Now you have no photography, you have no energy, and you basically, structured yourself to come to an end. That's the wrong way to look at it.
You just hit an idea that probably, at least 90% anyway of our listeners are qualified to do. And that's to teach photography in terms of your blog and your interaction in the community.
Yeah.
There are things that everybody listening now does that are second nature, whether it's composition or lighting or exposure. Let's get out there and teach mom and dad how to take better photographs of their family. They're not going to open up a studio and compete with you. Even if it's just to share things that they can do with whatever they're using. They don't have to have a real camera. They can be using their phones, but being able to talk about composition and being able to take better photographs puts people in a role of being, that leader in the community. And I'm not looking for everybody to be out there like a college professor teaching an advanced level photography course, but just to be able to share tips. And everybody's looking for blog content anyway.
Yeah.
So take the things that you do that are second nature and tie them into being the expert in the community and being a resource. And when people have a question on something, have them ask you. And if you don't have the answer, odds are everybody listening now has a half dozen people they know that have skill sets slightly different than theirs that would have the answers.
I completely agree. And the other thing, Skip, is You know, I would advise photographers. You know, a lot of them will turn around and say, "Oh, blogs. You know, I don't write very well. I don't know how to, you know, compose. You know, my blog in a way that it's going to be exciting." Well, then don't write. You know, get onto YouTube and show people how you did it or how you do it. You know, you'll build up an audience. You're not trying to get onto YouTube to become a YouTube rich person, but you're getting onto YouTube to communicate your skills and to help others in their photography. And to some extent, that will also enhance your audience. And I think that's what a lot of us want to do. Photographers are fundamentally show-offs. They love showing off. And what better way to show off than to actually demonstrate how you did it?
You know what I love about this is it's all tied to the theme of not only staying relevant to your community, but also just being helpful. Because showing educational tips, moms and dads, for example, how to take better photos of their kids, they need that more than ever right now. Being stuck at home, maybe some are afraid to hire a photographer. But let me tell you, when things loosen up in the economy and they are comfortable having an actual official family photo session, guess who they're going to call? Their community expert photographer.
Yep.
And you want them to think of you first, which is why I love all of these creative ideas. And Shiv, I'm curious, what's your outlook on the industry, the photography industry as a whole, kind of right now, but also moving forward into the future?
You know, it's a very interesting, and yet it's a question that you can contemplate and really wonder what is going to happen. I think right now we have reached some sort of a capacity equilibrium. The number of people coming into the industry and buying new gear has diminished to some extent. The industry itself has to invoke a much higher level of interest for acquisition of gear because, you know, we all as photographers have some sort of gear acquisition syndrome, and we want new and bigger and better and, you know, faster things. So if the industry can produce that and keep that level of interest going, it'll continue to, you know, even though it may be leveling out financially, it's going to continue to at least keep interest going. But going back to your very point a little bit earlier is that if you allow yourself as a photographer to go dormant during these times, you will remain dormant because people will forget you. The more you show yourself out in the industry, the more you self-promote yourself, the more you get into the concepts of, you know, educating, to being out there, to showing new and different things, that will keep you in the forefront, and those who don't do it will be forgotten. I mean, you know, who cares? I mean, there's a lot of people out there who can do it. And, you know, there was 10 years ago, we had this problem of Uncle Bob becoming the wedding photographer.
Yes.
And, you know, Uncle Bob took over. So wedding photography kind of went into the doldrums. But the good wedding photographers, they're still out there. There's the not so good ones. So how do you become from not so good to very good? It's just by promoting yourself. And I think Skip made a point in one of his blog posts about, you know, if you don't market yourself, you're nothing. And what better opportunity than to market yourself now when you have the time to do it? Because we always have an excuse not doing it because we don't have time. Well, now you have time and you're still not doing it.
And, you know, I've seen Uncle Bob shoot and at weddings, and he's not very prepared. Whether it be equipment or lenses or running out of memory space, like there's no question that the good wedding photographers are still out there. distinguishing themselves from the Uncle Bobs. So I love that you made that point. Love it.
And the more weddings that Uncle Bob does, the better the professional looks.
True. Yes.
So it's not all negative, even though I can't seem to say it right and get the sentence in the right order.
No, but you're making a very good point, Skip, and that's exactly what it is. You show the quality when you are seeing poor stuff. Yeah.
Absolutely. So we're coming to the end of this interview. And man, time flies. I know I always say that, but it's so true. It's like we just got started, and I love all of the lessons and advice that you're giving, Shiv, and I can't believe that we have to wrap this up, but I want to make sure and get our favorite final question in. What advice do you have for photographers who are just starting out right now in this interesting time in history?
There's one thing that I said at a session that I did a few months ago. And for photographers starting out, or even for photographers who've been in the business, try something a little different. And what I mean by trying something different is try and simplify whatever you do. Simplify your gear and simplify your images. And when I say simplify your gear, take one camera, one lens, and become so good at it that you become unbeatable. And why do I say that? Even things like, oh, I'm a photographer. I shoot only in manual mode. I don't use the aperture priority, or I don't use shutter priority. Find me a photograph that has a label that says this was shot in manual. You don't.
Exactly.
Right? It's not there. So, those are the things that, I'd like folks to just try out. Just simplify the process. Take 132 millimeter lens, or 135 millimeter lens, or 124 millimeter lens. Stick it on one camera body and say, for the next 10 days, that's all I'm going to use. And I'm going to see what I can create with it. And what I create with it should be simple enough that the message gets communicated. Because what we're learning in photography is telling a story, sending a message. That's what's important, not how you shot it with what you shot it with. I don't care whether you use a Hasselblad or you use a Brownie. It's the image that counts. Yeah. Sorry for bringing the Hasselblad story in, but
Well, I'm betting that 3/4 of our listeners don't know what a Brownie was. So there you go.
So that's all I can say as far as people who are experienced and people who are inexperienced. It's one thing. Tell your story. Tell it the best way you can.
Great advice.
Perfect. I can't think of a better way to wrap up this episode. Shiv, now where can folks find you online and check out your work?
It's very simple. If you know how to spell my name, and don't forget that there are 2 V's as you spell them, it's SHIV and VERMA.com. You're there.
Excellent. And we'll make sure to include that in the show notes as well. And Skip, where can folks find you?
I have no idea lately. I'm Skip Cohen on Twitter. I'm Skip Cohen on Facebook. And everything I write is shared on Skip Cohen University. And you'll find a lot of things from Shamira there too, as well as over on the Platypod blog. And my email is skip@mei500.com. And as I always say on every episode of Mind Your Own Business, we're always looking for feedback. If you've got somebody you think we ought to have on as a guest, if you've got a topic you'd like us to hit on, especially now during the pandemic when the other side of downtime is having time to listen to other people share some very creative ideas about building a stronger business. So, Shamira, where do they go to find you?
And before I get to that, I have to say, Skip, I am amazed that you did this entire interview on 0 sleep. I know we mentioned it earlier in the podcast, but just so the listeners understand, Skip has had no sleep at all last night. He pulled an all-nighter.
I had 2 hours spread out over the evening.
That doesn't count.
Probably. Yeah, but just to add one more thing to that, with all the rain we've had in Florida, we've got mushrooms coming up all over the place. If you've got dogs, everybody, keep them out of the mushroom patch. We've got puppies, and they got into some toxic mushrooms that fortunately weren't deadly, but no fun on the scale of poopage over the last 24 hours and throughout the night. So on that note, Shamira, where do people go to find you?
On that note, they can send me an email at shamira@photofocus.com. That's my first name, Chamira, at photofocus.com. We love getting ideas and questions and feedback because it drives how we move forward with this show. And we are all in this together, especially now more than ever. And having the amazing guests that we have on the show is really just helping to breathe life into the photography industry. And with that said, Shiv, thank you again for being awesome and chatting with us.
Great stuff you shared, and a lot of good insight.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and really it's been a pleasure. And as always, Skip, you're a great guy. Shamira,
thank you,
lovely
buddy.
Meeting you.
Thank you.
And hope to cross paths physically somewhere soon.
Absolutely. And looking forward to it. And we also want to make sure and thank our listeners for joining us as well. Please spread the word about this podcast, especially if you have photography friends who want to start or improve their photography business. We look forward to having you all with us next time on the Mind Your Own Business podcast, brought to you by Photofocus and Skip Cohen University.